Look at your wrists. Look at your ankles. You do not see heavy iron shackles binding you to a wall. You do not feel the physical whip of an overseer tearing across your back. Because of this, you walk through your days operating under a massive, devastating delusion. You actually believe that you are a free man. You believe that because you can choose what to watch on a glowing screen or what garbage to put into your body, that you are the master of your own destiny. But let me tell you the most brutal truth of the modern age. You are not free. You are a slave. You are a captive in a prison that has no physical walls. A prison designed so perfectly that the inmates fight furiously to defend it. The chains that hold you are not made of iron. They are made of dopamine, comfort, laziness, and the endless pursuit of cheap, unearned pleasure. You are a slave to your own fleeting impulses. When you feel tired, you quit. When you feel hungry, you eat. When you feel bored, you desperately reach for a distraction to numb your mind. You obey every single command your primitive brain gives you, without question, without resistance. You are a servant to your own biology. And the ancient Stoics had a very clear definition for a man who cannot govern. His own desires, a slave. It does not matter how much money is in your bank account, what car you drive, or what title you hold at your job. If you cannot command your own mind to do the things you do not want to do, you are at the absolute bottom of the hierarchy of power. It is time to open your eyes. It is time to look at the invisible chains wrapped tightly around your throat. It's time to understand that true freedom is not the ability to do whatever you want. True freedom is the ability to command yourself to do what is necessary. We must begin by destroying the greatest lie ever sold to the modern man. It is a lie that keeps millions of men weak, poor, and miserable. It is the myth of motivation. You sit around waiting for motivation to strike you like lightning. You watch videos, read quotes, and listen to speeches, desperately trying to pump yourself up with enough emotional energy to finally start working on your goals, to finally go to the gym, to finally build your empire. But motivation is nothing more than an emotional spike. It is a fleeting chemical reaction in your brain. It is entirely dependent on how much sleep you got, what you ate for breakfast, and whether or not the sun is shining outside. Relying on motivation to build, your life is like trying to sail a massive ship across a treacherous ocean by relying solely on the wind from a desktop fan. The moment you face a real storm, the moment the work becomes difficult, boring, or painful, that emotional high vanishes instantly. And because you are a slave to your emotions, the moment the motivation dies, your effort dies with it. You abandon the project. You skip the workout. You go back to your comfortable, miserable existence. You must understand that the men who conquer the world do not wait to feel like doing the work. They do not care about motivation. They do not care if they are sad, tired, angry, or uninspired. They operate on the ruthless, cold, mathematical architecture of iron discipline. Discipline is the rejection of emotion. Discipline is looking at the heavy stone, feeling every fiber of your being, screaming at you to leave it alone, and picking it up anyway. Discipline is the only hammer capable of breaking the chains of the inner slave. If you only work when you feel motivated, you will never achieve anything of lasting value. To understand the architecture of this prison, you must understand the poison that keeps you sedated. We are living in the empire of cheap pleasure. For the first time in human history, you have instant access to endless entertainment and digital stimulation. Every app on your phone, every algorithm, is engineered by billionaires to hack your brain's reward system. They are feeding you a continuous IV drip of cheap dopamine. This is not an accident. It is warfare. When you consume unearned pleasure, when you scroll for hours, you are flooding your brain with the exact chemical designed to reward you for surviving and conquering. But you have conquered nothing. You are sitting in a comfortable chair, achieving absolutely nothing. Yet your brain feels like an emperor. This creates a catastrophic short circuit in your mind. The inner slave becomes addicted to the sedation. Your baseline for stimulation becomes so high that the actual, brutal work required to build an empire, reading a difficult book, Lifting heavy weights, working in silence feels agonizingly boring and painful. You have traded your ambition for comfort. To break the chains, you must go to war with cheap dopamine. You must deliberately starve the slave. You must cut off the supply of unearned pleasure. Sit in the terrifying silence and force your brain to crave the reward that only comes from deep, meaningful, agonizing effort. If you want to understand what true power looks like, do not look at kings or billionaires. Look at Epictetus. Epictetus was born a slave in the Roman Empire. His physical body was owned by another man. He was crippled, his leg allegedly broken by his master. He had no wealth, no property, and no legal rights. By every metric of the modern world, he should have been the most miserable man on earth. Yet Epictetus achieved a level of power and freedom that Roman emperors desperately envied. How? Because he realized that while his master could chain his leg and command his labor, his master could never control his mind. Epictetus built an impenetrable fortress inside his own head. He stated, "No man is free who is not master of himself." He understood that true slavery is internal. A Roman emperor who is constantly terrified of being assassinated, who is a slave to his lust, his anger and his gluttony, is far more of a captive than the crippled slave who has absolute mastery over his own judgments and desires. Epictetus teaches us the ultimate protocol for liberation. You must aggressively separate everything in the universe into two categories: what is within your control and what is not. Your reputation, the economy, the opinions of strangers, these are outside your control. Agonizing over them is putting the chains around your own neck. But your beliefs, your reactions, your discipline, and your effort, these belong entirely to you. When you stop complaining about the things you cannot change and focus every ounce of your violent energy on mastering the things you can, you transition from the mind of a slave to the mind of an emperor. You become untouchable. So how do you practically forge this emperor mind? You cannot simply think your way into freedom. You must act your way into it through the architecture of routine and the ritual of voluntary suffering. The inner slave hates discomfort. The slave seeks the warm bed, the easy path, the path of least resistance. To kill the slave, you must deliberately and consistently inject controlled suffering into your daily life. This is not about self-harm. It is about self-mastery. When you wake up and the alarm goes off, the inner slave will beg you for 5 more minutes of sleep. That is the moment the battle begins. If you hit the snooze button, the slave wins. The chain tightens. But if you throw off the covers, stand up in the cold room and move, you land a devastating blow against the slave. You must seek out the cold water, the heavy weights, and the difficult conversations. By voluntarily choosing discomfort every single day, you are constantly reminding your primitive brain who is actually in charge. You are building an undeniable mountain of evidence that you are not controlled by your feelings. The Stoics called this voluntary hardship. They would wear rough clothing, sleep on the floor, or eat meager rations to prove to themselves that they could endure it. They were inoculating their minds against fear. When you have deliberately starved, frozen, and exhausted yourself on your own terms, what can the world possibly threaten you with? What can a financial crisis or a personal rejection do to a man who already tortures himself for growth every morning? Nothing. The fire of voluntary suffering burns away the weakness, leaving only the hardened, indestructible core of the emperor. The transition from slave to emperor is not an event. It is a lifelong, relentless campaign. There is no finish line where you can finally relax. The moment you stop enforcing discipline, the slave begins to wake up. The chains begin to form again. This requires a level of vigilance that terrifies the average man. The masses will look at your life of strict routine, isolation, and deliberate effort, and they will call you crazy. They will say you are missing out on the fun. They will try to drag you back down into the mud of their comfortable mediocrity. Let them talk. A lion does not concern himself with the opinions of sheep. They are defending their prison because they are too cowardly to break the bars. You are building a citadel, Every time you choose discipline over pleasure, you are laying another massive stone block in the wall of your inner fortress. Every time you work in the dark, without applause and without recognition, you are forging your iron crown. The world is looking for saviors. It is looking for easy answers and magic pills. There are none. There is only the anvil, the hammer, and the iron. You have the tools. You have the philosophy. The time for talking is over. The time for seeking validation is over. Look at your hands. The chains are heavy, but they are fragile. Stand up. Turn away from the noise, the digital circus, and the endless crowd of weak men. Step into the cold, silent forge of your own mind. Do the brutal, unforgiving work that no one else is willing to do. Break the chains of the inner slave. And when you finally emerge from the shadows, step forward and place the crown upon your own head.